Great, thank you, Krista. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Hopefully you can all see that now. Just for today's session, I'm going to be using Akindi's integration with Canvas. I understand some of you may be using Akindi with other LMSs or maybe without an LMS at all. So to start with, within your learning management system, you're going to go to the course that you want to use Akindi with. And if you haven't got Akindi enabled within your Canvas course, so you're not seeing it here on this menu, what you can do is go to Settings, and on the Navigation tab, just scroll down until you can see, it should probably be called Launch Kindy. Select these three dots here and you'll see an option to enable that, so that continues to appear in your course menu. And then once you've done that, click Launch Kindy. And we're going to click this orange button here, which is going to synchronize my course roster. So I can automatically see that all of my student ID numbers are appearing, the full students' names, their email addresses, and because I have sections in this course, that's also appearing here for me as well. So to get started, the first thing that you're going to do is click Create Assessment. Automatically, I have my course name populated in here. If I'd already launched Akindi from multiple different courses before, I would see some more options here, which I could choose. So I can just call this exam 1. And the default assessment type is going to be paper. So you can choose between paper and online, but for today, we're going to be leaving that as paper. And we can also choose to run multiple versions of the assessment. So Akindi allows you to run up to 6 different versions of the assessment. If you do choose to run multiple versions of the assessment, when you come to the answer key step, you will be able to enter as many versions of the answer key as you need. And on the printed test sheet, students will actually self-identify which version of the assessment they're taking, so that Akindi can grade them against the correct version of the answer key. I'm going to be turning off versions today, so we're just going to be using one version of the assessment. And we can also choose different layouts. So you'll see as I start swapping them, the preview or the sample on the right-hand side is also changing for me there. So our standard layouts that we offer are 50 question A to E up to 150 A to E there. And the final thing to show you is our pre-filled student information option. So if I select this, what's going to happen is Akindi is going to pull the information from my course roster to populate my students' first names, last names, and the student ID numbers there as well. So I'll have a printed out test sheet for each student in my course roster, and the students won't need to fill out those details themselves. In the show and title, we can also toggle to choose what appears in the header on the test sheet. So if I wanted to remove section name and student name, I can do so that it's just my course name and assessment name that are appearing there. So before we move on, I'm just going to stop to see if we have any questions yet.
We have a few questions coming in. One is, what if I have more than 150 questions on my test sheet?
Great question. If you do have more than 150 questions or you're looking for different answer options beyond A to E, just reach out to the Akindi team. It's likely that we'll probably have a test sheet that you're looking for, and we can deploy that to your account for you.
And then the other question is about 25 questions. So often quizzes only have 25 questions. How does that work?
Yes, so if you only have 25 questions or just less than the template itself, that's absolutely fine. When you come to your answer key, just fill out in this example, the answer key for your 25 questions. And when you grade it, and when you scan in and grade your test sheets, Akindi will actually ignore questions 26 to 50 because they haven't been filled out on your answer sheet. So students won't be graded against those questions.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. Those are all the questions we have right now.
So, okay. So we're going to move on to our next step in the process, which is entering our answer key. So for those of you that are new to Akindi, what I always recommend doing is the simplest way to get your answer key into Akindi is just selecting the correct answer for each question on our digital interface here. There are a few other ways that you can get your answer key into Akindi. So for those more experienced with Akindi, you may be familiar with this. You can copy and paste your answer key into Akindi. This is really useful if you have an answer key listed out in, let's say, like an Excel, CSV file, or even a Word document. You can actually just paste that in here. So for example, I can just do this and that will update. The other thing is our upload answer key. So if you use this option, you'll be prompted to upload a formatted version of your test questions in a docx file type. So on your test questions, if you highlight or if you kind of change the font color, make it boldface or italicize the correct answer for each question, and upload that to Akindi. Akindi can automatically recognize that and will populate your answer key here for you. I'm just going to stick to the basics today, but if you do have any more questions around these different options, please feel free to post in the chat, or you can visit our help center, which goes through full tutorials of how to carry out those different functions. So now I've entered kind of the basic correct answers for my answer key. You can choose to display advanced marking, which gives you the option to change the grading scheme as well as the weight of each question. So for example here, the student would need to select both A and B in order to get 1 mark for this question. I can change that to partial mark, so the student would receive partial credit if they select A or B and the full mark if they select both. And then we also have an either or question, so whether the student selects A or B, they'll get the full mark for that question. And we can also change the weight just by typing in here how much we want that question to be worth. I will stop again now just to pick up any questions that we do have around the answer key.
Great. We have a question. So do I need to create a separate answer sheet for each version of the assessment?
Great question. So if you had multiple versions of your assessment, what would appear here is a text box kind of drop down menu where you would see version A, version B, version C, etc., depending on how many versions you were running. You would just be able to choose between that toggle. So you would select version A, enter your answer key for version A, then do the same for version B and so on. So you don't need to run multiple versions of the assessment. You can house all the versions within one assessment in Akindi.
Perfect. We have one other question. So is it possible to edit my answer key after the assessment?
So the good thing about Akindi is that you can edit your answer key at any point during the process, even after you've scanned in and graded your test sheets. As we come to the end of the process, I'll show you how we can do that from the results page as well. Other thing to note is I've obviously entered a very quick answer key in here, but if you just want to set up your assessment and print out your test sheets, you can do that by clicking the skip for now button. And then whenever you're ready, you can come back in and enter your answer key then.
Great. We had one other question come in.
Okay.
Is it possible to set the default points to be worth 2.5?
So at the moment, it's not possible to make bulk changes within Akindi where all of the questions will be worth 2.5. But we can actually show you towards the end of the process a little hack about how you can do that when sending the grades back to the LMS. Adding bulk changes to answer keys is on our product roadmap and something that we're hoping to deliver very soon though.
Great. That's it from the questions right now.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll click continue, and that is it in terms of my assessment setup process. So you can click print bubble sheets from here, but I'm also going to close this page and show you how to access that from your course dashboard. So when you come back into Akindi, you'll see your latest assessment that you've edited appear on your dashboard. And you can click this print bubble sheets button here anytime to print out your students' test sheets. So here are test sheets. Because I've chosen to pre-fill student information, I have a test sheet for each student in my course roster here. If you didn't have that selected, you would just see one blank test sheet that you would be able to print out for as many students as you need or are in your course roster. There's a few things that I want to highlight around the printing process before we move on. So one thing, just as we're talking about versions, if you did have versions in your test, you would see little bubbles here labeled A, B, C, D, E, and the student would need to just bubble in, like we've done here, on the version that they're sitting of the assessment. And that's how Akindi grades the student against the correct version of the answer key. The other thing that's relevant for everybody, regardless of whether they're running multiple versions of the assessment or not, are these 4 black squares that appear in the corner of each test sheet. So Akindi uses these to help process and grade the test sheets. So it's really important to ensure that these are not cut off or faded or damaged in any way once you've printed out your test sheets. And the other thing is this QR code. So the same thing, please ensure that this is appearing as you see it here, isn't damaged in any way, because Akindi also uses this to assign a physical test sheet to a particular assessment in Akindi. So both of those things are really important for the processing and grading. Okay, I'm going to move back to,
We just have a few questions about the
yeah,
if I jump in.
sure. Let me go
The
back
one
here.
is do students have to use a pencil or can they use a pen?
So students can use any type of pencil or pen to fill out the test sheet. So that is absolutely fine. As long as it makes a dark enough mark against the page, that's okay.
Great. Last one, are there any specific printer settings needed?
So you can use just the regular settings on your printer normally. As I mentioned, the only thing to watch out for is just making sure that like once it's printed, like things aren't faded or cut off in any way, so that you have the full test sheet appearing.
Great. Oh, we have
So,
two others
oh,
that just came in. What should a student do to change an answer if they're using a pen?
So we'll come to this in just a moment, but if it's really important, just like the student indicates that to you, but we'll show you in a moment how to handle it within Akindi. Normally they can do the kind of standard thing of if they've bubbled in A, let's say, and C, they can just cross out A. Just as long as it's clear to you what they indicated the correct answer to be there. But I'll come back to that in a moment.
Mhm. The other question was the same thing around a student making an error. What will they
Oh,
do?
okay, great.
Great.
So let's get those test sheets into Akindi. We can show you how to handle that. So there are 2 different ways that you can scan and process your Akindi test sheets once the students have completed them. The first way is that you'll see on your in your account on each assessment, you have a unique email address here. So this is your Akindi email address. What you can do is actually enter this email address into your scanner. And when you scan the test sheets, those scanned test sheets will come immediately into your Akindi account and populate these assessment results. The other way to get your test sheets into Akindi is scanning the test sheets to your own personal email address and then uploading the PDF file of your scanned test sheets by clicking Upload Response Sheets, choose the file, and then here I have some sample test sheets we're going to be using for today, and then clicking Upload here. So Akindi is now going to start processing these test sheets. As that's going on and kind of once that's finished, what we're going to see is a certain number of issues are going to appear, also sometimes referred to in Akindi as exceptions. So these might be students misfilling information like their name or the student ID number, or as a few people have mentioned, it might be things where they've made a mistake or something on their test sheet. So essentially they're things where Akindi doesn't really know what to do and wants your intervention. So this is an example of a student that made a mistake on their test or changed their mind about what they thought the correct answer was. Anytime that a student selects more answer options for a particular question than appear on the answer key, Akindi will call this to your attention. So in this example, I can see that the student tried to cross out C. So I want Akindi to grade the student as if they've only selected B. So what I'm going to do is unselect C, and that green tick is just going to indicate to me that Akindi's now saved that and regraded the student against this update. It's also worthwhile noting that you can click into these images. So I can actually see which student and which test sheet this came from. And the other thing, as I mentioned, are students misfilling their information out. So what's happened here is the student's written their first name and last name, but hasn't left any information about their student ID number, which Akindi uses as the unique identifier. So Akindi's provided a couple of suggestions of who it thinks the student might be, but none of these are correct. So if you click on this drop-down menu, you then can actually search the student from your course roster, select them, and again, that green tick indicates Akindi saved that change. On this particular example, the student has written out their ID number, but hasn't filled out the corresponding bubbles from their student ID number. So what we're going to do again is just search for that student and select them from our course roster. So those are all our issues handled. I know we had originally some questions around that, so I just want to stop to see if we do have any outstanding questions before I move on.
We do have a few questions. We'll see if anyone, for the people that asked the questions about the errors, let me know if there's any follow-up questions around that as well. So other questions that came in. So do I have to filter the test sheets at all before I scan them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Not really at all. So it doesn't matter the order that the test sheets are scanned in. You can also scan your test sheets in multiple batches. We recommend scanning in batches of no more than around like 100, 150 test sheets at a time. And also, even if your test sheets are upside down, Akindi, as I mentioned before, uses these 4 locator squares, and these squares actually do help Akindi rotate the test sheets the correct way around during the grading process. So you don't need to do much sorting at all before scanning in your test sheets.
And can you confirm, even with versions, they don't have to be sorted by version at all?
That's correct. Yeah, they don't have to be sorted by versions.
Great. Oh, and then you answered the other question of a large class. Is there a limit to the number of test sheets scanned at once? So we touched on that.
Yes, around 100, 150 normally. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Krista. So let's move on to our results. So the first thing that we're going to see when we click into our results is the analytics that Akindi provides. So on the overview tab, it provides or attempts to answer 2 questions for you. So the first is, how well did my students do on the test? And the second is, how well was my test designed? So Akindi will provide the average percentage grade achieved on the test, as well as the highest percentage grade and the lowest percentage grade. It will also showcase what it deemed as the easiest questions on the assessment, as well as the most difficult, based on the percentage or number of students that answered that question correctly. You can hover over any of these to actually see the breakdown of the number or percentage of students that selected each answer option for those questions. Same here. And for our how well was my test design section, Akindi is actually showcasing you a discriminatory score. So essentially what this is trying to do is show the correlation between whether a student answered a question correctly or not and how well the student performed on the test overall. So we'd expect to see, for a well-constructed question, a student that performed high on the test overall would answer a well-constructed question correctly. Akindi will also show you some questions that may have achieved a particularly low discriminatory score and might need your intervention or something for you to review. There can be a number of reasons for this. One of them is that perhaps I just made a mistake on the answer key that I need to correct, or it might be that you perhaps have a question on the test that was quite ambiguous and it's something for you to review. And maybe you kind of want to make some changes for that for this cohort of students, which I'll show you how to do just in a moment's time. You can also choose to, if you do have sections or versions in your assessment, you can choose to view this by sections. And if we did have versions, we would have the option to view this broken down by versions too. Then we have our graphs tab. So here you can see the full list of student marks across my course roster, the grade distribution from the test, our answer breakdown, so the number or percentage of students that answered each question correctly versus incorrectly. If you select any of the bars on the chart, Akindi will also show you the breakdown of the number of students percentage that selected each answer option. And finally, we'll see our point by serial or discriminatory score for each question on the test instead of what Akindi pulled out on the overview before, which was just the best constructed questions and any that might require intervention. And finally, we have our responses, which provides essentially like our raw results from the test. So what we can see here is the results for each student on the course roster, their percentage grade, their mark overall, as well as the different answer options that they selected. So just to give you a few bit of information on the key here, any cell that is white or blank indicates the student got that question correct. Any cell that is filled in red indicates the student got it incorrect. And if we had a cell that was orange and blank, that would indicate the student didn't choose an answer option for that particular question. So as I mentioned before, we do sometimes have times where we need to make a change to the answer key after the fact. So we saw before that my question 2 looks like it is not a particularly well constructed question, or there might be issues with it. So in this example, what I want to do is actually award my student, every student credit for that question. If you want to edit the answer key from this page, what you can do is in the answer key row, locate the question that you want to change and just click into the answer. It'll bring up this modal, and here I can make changes. So I can make this either or. And so now, whether the student selected any of these options, they're going to get a mark. I click OK, and remember to click Save Changes, which will appear at the top of the table. And Akindi will now automatically regrade my test sheets against this updated answer key. So there are a few things that we can do in terms of exporting the results. One of them is to download the CSV. So essentially, if we did that, it would present or kind of export the information, all of the information that we see on this table here. If we chose to download the question breakdown CSV, that would provide a lot of information that we saw or data that we saw on the overview and graphs tab. The other things that we can do are emailing students their grades or downloading corrected test sheets. This essentially is going to provide students with a image of their scanned test sheet, which has also been graded, and in some cases a more full report. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is the report that students would get if they were emailed a link to their grades. So we can see here we have the overview of their percentage grade and the marks they've achieved. And also we can see that this is the student's actual test sheet that they filled out, and it's been graded. So I can see green ticks against the answers they got correct. And also you can choose whether you want to turn this on or off, but here I have the correct answers labeled next to any incorrect responses. So if I come back to our actions and click email students their grades, this is as mentioned, the report they're going to see. I can choose to remove this so that students aren't going to be shown the correct answers on their test sheet. They're just going to see green ticks and red check marks against each question on the sheet. And we can also customize the subject line as well as the email that's sent to students here. The other thing that you can do is downloading correct sheets. So what this will present to us is actually this sheet here is all that we'll be downloading. So the graded sheet of each student. And there are a number of ways you can do this. So you can choose to have all of the test sheets in one PDF file. This is really useful if you want to print out all of the graded test sheets for students and hand them out in class, for example. Or you can have each test sheet appear in its own PDF file. We also have the option again to either show the answers or hide the answers on the test sheet. And we can sort these downloaded options by student ID number, or they can be ordered alphabetically by first name or last name. The final thing that we can do with the test sheets, and kind of the thing I'm sure you're all eager to know about, is sending them back to the LMS. So here I have my option to send the grades back to Canvas. When we click this button, we have the option of creating a new grade column in Canvas, which I can choose to label that differently if I want, quiz 2, for example. Or if I already have a grade column set up in my Canvas gradebook, I can just select that and all of these grades will go into that grade column. So we had a question earlier in today's session about making bulk changes or having like the default marks to something other than 1, for example, for each question. One workaround that you can do is you can actually scale the marks here so that they appear out of a different number in Canvas. So if, for example, I wanted all the marks to be worth 2, I can make the default here 20. If I want all the marks to appear out of 100 for students in their Canvas gradebook, we can scale that as so. So this is quite a good workaround for actually making some bulk changes if all of the questions on your test are going to be worth the same marks, but are going to be worth more than 1. And then I'll just create a new assessment. We already have one, so let's actually rename that. Then I'm going to click export. And Akindi will start now sending each of those students' grades back to the Canvas gradebook. So I'm going to stop here for questions.
A question around editing answer keys. So if I edit my answer key after sending the grades to learning management system, will the grades automatically be updated?
That's an excellent question. In that scenario, no. Any changes you make here will not automatically be reflected in your learning management system. So if I sent the grades to Canvas and now was making a change to the grades, I would actually need to click send grades to Canvas again. I would use have my last used assessment so they're going into the same grade column and just updating, and click export again.
Perfect. And then one last question, just to go over it one more time. What is the easiest way to provide students with which questions they answered incorrectly?
So the 2 ways to do that are by using our email students their grade option. So here you can customize the email that's sent to students. In the email, they'll automatically get a link to a particular report, which will look like this. So here they can see the full breakdown of what they got correct versus incorrect. And I can choose whether I want to show the correct answers on that test sheet or not. If I chose to untick this, then I'm just going to see green ticks and red check marks against each answer option. And the other way was to download corrected sheets. So you have a few different options here. Again, you can choose whether you want to show or hide the test sheet, the correct answers. And the students would see, like if we were to download those, this is what would be downloaded. Again, they won't have like that full report, but it will be the full kind of breakdown of what they got correct versus incorrect there.
Thank you. Those are all the questions that we had right now.
Awesome. Okay, so just have a few more things to show you before we wrap up. So one of them is our collaborate feature. So this is really useful if you have other faculty or other staff members that will be collaborating or accessing or using this Akindi course in any way, especially if you have a TA that helps you with any of the kind of assessment setup or printing or scanning of the test sheets. So for example, if I wanted to add Krista to my course, because she already has an Akindi account, she's going to appear in that list. If she didn't, I would just enter the full email address. I can then choose the permissions that she would have for this assessment. So I can choose view, edit, or admin permissions, and I can also choose whether that is for a particular section or not. View essentially means that Krista wouldn't be able to make any changes within my Akindi course. So she wouldn't be able to create new assessments, edit existing assessments, upload test sheets, or send the grades back to Canvas. If I gave her edit permission, she would have very similar permissions to me as the owner of the course. So she would be able to create new assessments, update existing assessments. The only thing she wouldn't be able to do are sending the grades back to the learning management system, as well as inviting or making changes to the course collaborators. And as an admin, she would have basically exactly the same rights as me as the course owner. When we click invite, Krista would receive an email from Akindi notifying her that she'd been invited to collaborate on my Intro to Sociology course, and she'd be able to see all of this and edit based on the permissions that she had. Final thing is how to get help if you do have any questions as you're getting going. So we have this little icon here appears on every page within the Akindi application. This is where you can access both our help center as well as our support team. So you can search our help articles from here. Or if you have or if you can't find the answer within our help articles, please feel free to send us a message. So our support team are available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m., 6 p.m. Eastern time. And we always aim to try and respond within 30 minutes of receiving your message. I'll stop to see if we have any final questions before we wrap up for today.
We don't have any questions that have come in the last few minutes, but we'll stick around and see if any other questions come in around any aspect of the Akindi workflow, or if you have questions around how to transfer something specific in your course to Akindi, we're happy to answer those as well. And that's
awesome. If anybody has to jump off now, when you close the webinar, you will see a survey question appear. We're just interested to see like what else that we can do to kind of support you or make your Akindi experience better. So please do let us know what we can do there if you have time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's a question around upcoming webinars. So I don't think we don't have another paper webinar scheduled. We have a hybrid webinar scheduled. Is it next weekend? I don't remember the exact date.
Yeah, it's next Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, I think.
And then we will be having an Kindy online webinar coming up in the next few weeks, but we'll be sure to send out this recording to everyone that attended or registered so they have access to it. And you're obviously welcome to reach out to us directly. We see some comments on the Canvas integration. I'm glad that you like that. That'll be fun. I'm glad that is so helpful. Yes, we will provide a recording of this webinar. Great.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions once we've jumped off, you know now how to get in touch with us. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you all so much. Bye.
Okay, bye.